Vertigo is widely recognized as Hitchcock's masterwork, yet there's a certain sequence that surreptitiously altered the production process for films forever. Most folks didn't notice it entirely. This wasn't the well-known The Dream sequence, or the staircase moment. Something far more subtle was involved. Something that each and every great director for the following 60 years. It was copied. Spielberg Jaws made use of it. It was placed in good by Scorsese. Guys, this is even used in Marvel films. Method today. However, film schools hardly bring it up. Today, we make public what you missed. Hitchcock's interest with a pair of French authors Buot and Narco had an initial crush on disappointment that would alter his profession. He made an attempt in the early 1950s. The rights to their thriller are difficult to purchase. Can it sell? She was no longer there. He thought it was the ideal tale for his approach to examining deceit, guilt, and homicide. He lost the bidding war, though Tagore Clou, a French director, Clouseau pivoted the novel into the 1955 movie Le Diabolik, still regarded by many as one of the finest horrifying thing ever created. For Hitchcock, the loss was not just a professional one. He had earned his reputation by obtaining the greatest material and falling short against a rival. From Europe, sliced deeply, the setback turned into the catalyst. It motivated him to pursue the pair's new project with a level of dedication he had never previously displayed. His opportunity arrived sooner, more than anyone anticipated. In 1954, Paramount Pictures requested a summary of BWO and Dantrila, written by Narayak, 2 years prior to the book's translation into English. The English translation, known as The Dead and the Living, wouldn't show up till 1956. However, Hitchcock had already started forming the project only using summaries. Paramount invested heavily in the concept without even anticipating the interpretation at the time. It was an uncommon risk. The action demonstrated the level of faith that the studio was situated in Hitchcock's intuition. Later, François Truffaut claimed that the book had composed specifically for Hitchcock, however, denied this. However, the swiftness and assurance with which Hitchcock acquired the rights and they became his myth. The topics of the narrative were an ideal fit for Hitchcock's personal history. He has collaborated with, during World War II, with propaganda, from British intelligence, watching movies and studying psychology, surveillance, and combat. The notion of secretly observing someone and doubting who they really were comes straight from his observations during the conflict. The ongoing scrutiny, the concealed facts, and the toll they had on all of the human mind contributed to Vertigo. The fascination of Scotty Ferguson with observing Malene reflected both the methods that Hitchcock had researched and the how he guided his performers. He was well known for managing each motion and forming them into the picture he desired. As Scotty attempted to reshape Judy into Malene, this relationship developed considerably more powerful when Hitchcock encountered a significant change. In casting, his selection, Vera Miles, an actress, had a contract to him and had undergone meticulous preparation for the rigorous dual role. She had featured in 1956's The Wrong Man and appeared in Alfred, his television series, presenting Hitchcock. By November of that year, she was already applying cosmetics that year, and testing of hairstyles, and costume designers Edith Head was putting together her clothes. In fact, Miles had posed for the portrait of Carlotta is utilized in scenarios at museums. However, Hitchcock, in March 1957, recuperating, received the news following gallbladder surgery. That made all the difference. Miles informed him she was expecting a child. It was the third time she had pregnancy with Gordon Scott, her spouse, most famously as Tarzan. Hitchcock sensed betrayed and said that the choice was wrecked. What he referred to as her opportunity to become a fantastic star. He was so furious that even 20 years later, he continued to discuss the lack of appreciation, stating her departure had cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in casting modifications and production delays. In order to save the film, Hitchcock looked to Harry Kahn, a strong leader of Kim Novak, was obtained by Columbia Pictures. It was a remarkable bargain for 1957. $250,000 was given to Columbia for giving Paramount the loan of Novak, despite even if she was barely earning $1,250 a week in Columbia. The distinction was astounding. About $200 times her weekly income compensate. Even though it was expensive, Hitchcock was so certain that she was correct in the portion that he didn't even request that she take a screenshot test. The money was too much for Columbia, decent enough to decline, notwithstanding Kahn that they didn't like the writing. However, Novak refused to be put to use. So effortlessly she cherished the part. However, when she saw Columbia stealing $250,000, when she was only making $1,250, she didn't show up to set for a week. For a young actress, it was a daring move. When opposing the studio system in 1957 might ruin a career, she brought on a fresh agents and called for a more equitable agreement. Harry Kahn retaliated by suspending her, but under the influence of Paramount and Hitchcock's timetable, he ultimately provided in Novak received a $3,000 pay increase, more than twice what she had in a week. Been producing. Later, she informed reporters, "I dislike it when someone takes exploit me." Her position was a signal. Dramatic transformation in Hollywood, where celebrities were beginning to resist the outdated system for the studio. Even after the agreement combat, Novak encountered again another conflict, this time over the way she looked. She informed Edith, being aware that she wore no suits, she wasn't dressed in gray, and she wasn't wearing pumps. In black, when he conveyed that message, Hitchcock made it apparent that he did not give a damn about Novak's preferences as long as she was dressed in a gray suit. He had imagined the precise appearance far in advance of production, and nothing would make him reconsider. Edith Head subsequently acknowledged that it was among the most difficult tasks of her career, claiming that getting Novak dressed for the movie tested every psychological skill she has. Novak detested the ensemble and revealed Hitchcock straight, but he demanded was appropriate for the position. He desired for her to feel uneasy in Mellon's meticulous created identity. Afterwards, Novak acknowledged that he had been correct. "I said," she said, "it didn't feel right as Melling, and that was the correct thing to do." Unusually for a blonde, the gray suit gave her a spooky expression that was essential to the eerie atmosphere of the movie. When Dizziness was initially made public in 1958, the response was not at all what Hitchcock had envisioned. It was ripped up by many critics. The latest, John McCartan of Yorker, rejected it as far-fetched bullshit. Time magazine dismissed it as just another Hitchcock film and bulltale. Variety acknowledged that Hitchcock's competence, but claimed that the movie was too lengthy and sluggish, or what they referred to as a murder mystery with a psychological component. Philip K., the Los Angeles Times, Shire, believed the narrative dragged and became engrossing. Lots of information. The New York Post went to moreover, mentioning Hitchcock's fluid manner led him to believe that he could disregard reason and realism, asserting that the movie would disassembled under careful examination. Even the New York Times, Bosley Chris, who offered some commendation, referred to The Big Secret incredibly unrealistic. Learner later, Dan Orr pointed out that these evaluations influenced the majority of commentators at the time. The response in England was even colder. 13 of the 28 reviews were almost entirely negative. The severe reviews that were carried over to the theater, and Vertigo turned into an eye-opening commercial. Disappointment, it earned around $3.20. $2 million in the U.S. According to just the 21st of the year. Around the world, the initial release only brought in $171.92 South, $158,000, to an additional $85 from domestic displays. For a while, this was heartbreaking. Approximately $2.5 million was spent on the film. To produce, it failed to even regain its budget, which is unprecedented for a that was a Hitchcock movie. The word-of-mouth negativity made things worse, and executives at Paramount started to question if Hitchcock could still ensure success at the box office. For decades, the movie was viewed as a low-budget failure. Juncture in his career, not till starting in 1983. Reissues that the movie ultimately recouped its expenses and began to be acknowledged for what it really was. The Academy Awards were added to the pain. In spite of its revolutionary Vertigo's technological boldness and style, only 2 nominations were received at both of the 1959 Oscars were in technical classifications. The Best Set and Art Direction ornamentation for Henry and Hal Pereira. George's Best Sound is Bumstead. Dutton. Nothing is better than Hitchcock. Nothing for James Stewart, director, or nothing for Best Picture. And Kim Novak, even its innovative use of cinematography, editing, as well as Bernard Herrmann's Eerie, the musical score was disregarded. Within a year, the absence of Gigi's Best Picture, when Vertigo's recognition was particularly unpleasant. The movie didn't receive either of its 2 nominations, solidifying its standing at the period as one of Hitchcock's most significant disappointments. However, from this alleged setback, one of the greatest significant technological advancements in the Dolly Zoom-in movies, this result was produced with the cooperation of Roberts, Manny, and Hitchcock, a cameraman extraordinaire who never even obtained appropriate recognition for the inventiveness. At the time, it was known as the contra zoom, or a trombone shot. It was created in 1958 from the ground up with no precedent or guidance. Roberts' proficiency with focused lenses and unique camera gear allowed for the possibility of accomplishing the goal Hitchcock had been after. For over 18 years, Hitchcock had a lengthy want-to-picture that would show the feeling of lightheadedness and disorientation, a concept he acknowledged was motivated by an evening of excessive drinking at London's Chelsea Arts Ball. He initially attempted to do it during the Rebecca's creation in 1940, although there was no technology yet. And finally, Roberts made it happen. Vertigo. The lens was zoomed in to create the appearance, while simultaneously shifting the camera back, maintaining the same size of the subject as the backdrop extended or compressed in an abnormal way. Reaching this needed precise computations and faultless, all completed by hand, in 1958, without motion control or computer assistance systems. In the well-known scene on the staircase, Roberts matched the zoom speed carefully and motion of the camera to display James in a manner Stewart's fear of heights audience had never encountered before. It was more than just a camera trick. Viewers were given a sense of the similar confusion to that of the character, causing actual vertigo symptoms. Later research revealed that it might result in similar responses to acrophobia, such as nausea and vertigo. Regarding the first time, a film wasn't merely narrative. Viewers, the emotions of a character, it was causing them to feel it as well. This altered the cinematic language. Spielberg made advantage of Jaws' unexpected display of dread. Goodfellas and Scorsese will produce Peter Jackson in The Lord and Paranoia of the Rings to indicate impending peril. It became the best method to demonstrate on-screen revelation, trauma, or shock. Alfred Hitchcock produced one of the most audacious career decisions when he decided to disclose Judy Barton's true identity. 3/4 of the way through Dizziness. At that time, viewers discovered that she was the same individual who had assumed the identity of Malene. Typically, such surprises were left for the thriller's last moments, but Hitchcock disregarded that guideline. The choice was made while writing the screenplay. Change, when author Samuel A. Taylor lobbied for this and added fresh conversation, unexpected disclosure. By revealing the facts prior to the last action, the movie ceased to be a mystery and turned to become a study of control and obsession. Rather than speculating like Scotty, viewers observed him struggle in ignorance while being aware of what Judy had done it. This change made her from a normal female killer to a more multifaceted personality, one who is weighed down by regret and guilt. Some detractors believed the choice destroyed the tension, yet others thought it advanced the plot. Greater depth. Since the movie's release in 1958, individuals have continued to divide it, debating whether the early reveal was an error or an act of brilliance. Over time, people began to perceive it as one of the boldest methods in movie history. A decision that contributed to a masterpiece is Vertigo. The dispute strengthened by the alleged letter scene. Judy took a seat at this time to compose a confessional essay outlining how they'd staged Malene's death. At first, Hitchcock retained the scene, since he believed it benefited the viewers. Recognized Judy's remorse and anxiety as she got back together with Scotty. However, following the test screenings, he started to question his own abilities. Concerned that it revealed too much, he cut the full sequence prior to its release. Later, Samuel A. Taylor acknowledged that they had erred by stating that, following the previous musical performance, it would have been the ideal moment to clarify Judy's secret. He referred to the sequence of letters as feeble, but yet thought taking it out was worse. Hitchcock considered this to be an uncommon crisis of trust. Renowned for providing information to audiences so they can experience as the strain increased, he decided to keep back, and it almost made the whole movie. The actors themselves were apprehended. Up in the edit-related conflicts, James, the actor who played Scotty, Stewart, stunned Herbert Coleman, a producer, with his apathy. Coleman had put up a valiant fight to preserve the original vision of Hitchcock, yet Stewart dismissed him, stating, "The image isn't that significant." It was amazing remarks made by an actor who was appearing in what would eventually be regarded as among the best movies ever produced. Coleman was so enraged that he almost quit over the cuts made by the studio. The irony was that Hitchcock acknowledged afterwards Stewart might have been too old at 49 for the part. However, a lot of detractors still call Stewart gave his best performance. What made his termination even more noteworthy? Believed that the movie would ultimately be top-ranked in the 2012 site and a survey of the best films ever made time. Stewart's comment demonstrated how even major celebrities could be utterly misguided. The significance of their work apportioned, the movie was nearly destroyed completely when Barney, the head of Paramount Balaban, took over. After observing the original version that still has the surprise, Balaban was ecstatic and went back to New York to advertise it. However, catastrophe struck when he unintentionally displayed to critics a version without the letter scene. The response was vicious. The same detractors who had now complimented the complete version deemed it Hitchcock's worst movie ever produced. Balaban felt furious. Coleman remembered that he believed the entire due to the catastrophe. The studio would be dismissed. Balaban, enraged, gave the order to reinstate it, requesting that Prince be remembered from movie theaters throughout the country and remixed with fresh tunes. The costly last-minute rescue was avoided, preventing Vertigo from being ignored, and guaranteed that one day it would be recalled as the best of Hitchcock's work. However, even with its subsequent acknowledgement, Vertigo was heavily criticized by feminists, academics. In 2012, the movie was hailed as the best ever produced. However, many contend that it depicts women in a really unsettling manner. An academic from 2020 research looked into how Hitchcock frequently portrayed women as objects of desire as opposed to complexity people. The study linked dizziness due to a pattern in his other movies from 1940s, Rebecca Till in 1960, Psycho, demonstrated how women were framed repeatedly using a male-centric perspective. The most unsettling, The Transition serves as an example. Scenario where Judy is coerced by Scotty to become Melon once more. Hitchcock acknowledged in a conversation with Francois Truffaut, in which he wanted the occasion to represent a sexual behavior. Critics of feminism believe that this validated their concerns that the movie transformed obedient females into erotic spectacle. The function of Scotty as a detective already turned him into a sort of expert voyage, and the camera itself also participated, persisting in Judy's hesitant change.